This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything, from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 298 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Mark Wethington, director of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, all about gardening for hummingbirds. The plant profile is on ostrich ferns, and we share what's going on in the garden as well as some upcoming local gardening events in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on preventing lettuce tip burn from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by returning guest Mark Wethington, director of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. Welcome back, Mark.
Hi, good to be right here, Kathy.
Great to have you. We're going to talk about all things hummingbirds in our garden. But before we get into that, Mark, you were last on with co-worker Tim Alderton, right? Episode 229, Mahonia Reexamined, February 2025. So that was about a year and a half or so ago. So anything new happening with you or the Arboretum?
Well, it is our 50th anniversary this year, 2026. It marks 50 years. So we've been celebrating all year with our golden anniversary. We've done everything from industry reunions, and we're getting ready to have a big birthday party for the public with cake and ice cream. And in September, we've got our Golden Gala, which will be a lot of fun. But we've also been continuing our midweek programs. We do a live Zoom program, 3 o'clock every Wednesday, and then put it on our YouTube channel as well.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on that 50th anniversary. I'm sure that cake is going to be delicious. And so always doing great things at the Arboretum. So anybody who's ever passing through or by Raleigh, North Carolina, definitely should visit. Any new additions to the garden or exhibits that people should look out for, or maybe something blooming now that's looking especially good?
Well, the whole garden is blooming, but we did renovate a large area of the garden. We put in some berms. We love a little bit of topography, and we were pretty flat for most of the garden. So we built some berms, and really we're growing some plants there that we haven't had success with in previous locations, growing them flat. So we're experimenting with all kinds of plants in these gardens.
Oh, interesting. Might have to have you come back on to talk about berms and gardening. That's a really interesting comment. I do see people like with new homes way out in, on a country road or way out in the suburbs, putting berms up between them and the main street.
Sure.
So it's always interesting to hear what's growing on each side of that berm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's turn now to our hummingbirds episode. And I know you recently did one of those midweek programs all about hummingbird gardening. And I think hummingbirds are one of the most popular, we're going to say pollinators, not just birds, that people want to have in their garden. So what makes hummingbirds so charming, do you think, Mark?
Well, boy, what not to say. So many of them are jewel-toned, although that's not all of them. But just the way they move about the garden, the flitting around, the flying perfectly still while they're sipping from a flower and then zipping off right as you get your camera out. They just add a little bit of magic to the garden. They're like little garden fairies almost, the way they move around and flit around the garden.
I agree. They're so beautiful and so fun. And I love how the males are kind of aggressive, right, with each other. Maybe, they might even be a little aggressive with you, the gardener, if you're in between them and their food source.
Yeah, and if you do a good job with your hummingbird garden, you will have hummingbirds that you'll almost get to know because they will come back, time and again.
And do we ever get any that are, I don't want to say imported, but maybe stray here, a hurricane comes through and blows up some different hummingbirds that you might see every once in a while?
You get that on occasion, and those who are plugged into the birding community will often they'll often report something, one that's appeared somewhere that is really out of the ordinary. Usually they get blown up from farther south or west of us, but yeah, it does happen on occasion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that every once in a while, and that's really special when you see one that's not the ordinary hummingbird. But even saying ordinary hummingbird sounds, crazy, Mark, because there's no such thing as as an ordinary hummingbird.
Yeah, I love being out in the garden and even talking with experienced longtime gardeners. You'll be in the middle of a conversation, they'll say, "Oh, there's a hummingbird." People are always excited, no matter how many times they see him, to see another hummingbird.
Mm-hmm. And what times of day are best to see the hummingbirds in your garden?
Well, we get them really out in the arboretum almost all day long. If it gets really hot, sometimes they take a little break in the shade, but they stay active if you have some good shade plants that are hummingbird friendly. They're not like a lot of our bees and butterflies and other pollinators that kind of stay away from the shade. They build their nests in trees, and if you have good plants in the shade, they'll kind of work in there during the hottest parts of the day.
Well, that brings us to what plants do attract hummingbirds. So maybe we'll talk in generalities to start, which is like the shapes, the colors that you might look for in a plant at a nursery or garden center, and kind of narrow it down and figure out that's what a hummingbird wants.
Yeah, I mean, in general, long tubular flowers, but you got to remember that hummingbird's only a few inches long, so long tubular flower may mean different things to us. But the hot colors tend to attract them more: the reds, the oranges, yellows. Although with red being their favorite, you're going to definitely attract more to red tinged flowers than to blue, for instance. But that doesn't mean they won't go to other colors. It's just those are the ones that they are most attracted to. We often, when we talk about plants, when you see lists of plants, you see things that are flowering all during the summer, the hottest season. That's when a lot of those red flowers are out. But with really careful planting, you get them from early spring. We get them as early as late March, April. They'll start showing up, and they'll stay around through, pretty well into fall if it's warm. So, the other key is having things that bloom throughout the growing season. So we don't, if there's nothing there in spring for them, you're less likely to have them show up in summer.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Mark. I think a lot of hummingbirds are arriving earlier and later in our warming climate than people are expecting. So people who normally put out a hummingbird feeder, say with the sugar water in it, might not be putting it out early enough, and there might not be enough blooms to support them open at that time.
And I'll add, the sugar water and really even the nectar that they're getting is a quick rush of energy for them, but they really actually need a lot of protein as well. And they do eat small insects in the garden. They're very good for that. So, there's another thing, like when we're trying to attract pollinators in general, you can't be out spraying insecticides and things like that and expect to have a healthy hummingbird population. Like always I say, you if you need to treat something, you treat very targeted things. But we grow 8,000 different plants out here at the Arboretum. If something is prone to insects, we just rip it out and put something else in. There's no time in my mind for gardening with really disease or insect prone plants.
I like that approach, Mark. That keeps it really simple. And then you're not using chemicals like herbicides and pesticides that would affect our pollinators, but especially our little hummingbird friends. And they are so little, Mark. Have you ever handled a tiny hummingbird? It's like barely the top of your thumb, and the weight is, I think, about the weight of a nickel, if you can imagine that in your hand.
Yeah, I've had them in greenhouses before where they've gotten stuck in there and they fly and fly until they're just completely worn out. And at that point, you can get them. You can usually get them and move them outside carefully. I don't like to try and capture them while they're flying around because there's always still a chance they'll get out on their own. But I also am terrified of hurting a wing or something like that.
Yeah, you don't want to injure them at all, and they're so delicate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, occasionally you'll find one on the ground who got stunned or maybe, as you said, exhausted themselves trying to exit a greenhouse or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have those. And there is a hummingbird lookalike that visits our gardens, at least here in the Mid-Atlantic, and that's our hummingbird moth.
Yeah. The first time I saw one of those, I was like, this is a cross between a moth, a hummingbird, and a shrimp. Something about the body of the tail that reminded me of the tail. And I was absolutely gobsmacked when I saw one. And they kind of prove the thing that people are fascinated by, the way the hummingbird moves, because that's what this does. It moves just like the hummingbird, where it sits still and then it flits off a little bit and moves on. And yeah, it's just that movement in the garden. That's the underappreciated part of the garden, whether it's your plants moving or the birds and insects, the way they move through. We don't appreciate movement as much as sight and scent and maybe sound.
Yeah, and the hummingbird moth is pretty cool. I mean, it's not a bird at all, of course, but it does do a great pollinator job. And I especially see them around like the edges of ponds, like maybe swampy areas, I would say. That's where I tend to see them the most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And speaking of water and water sources, I know hummingbirds do need a lot. So is there something specific we should be putting out for our hummingbird friends?
Well, yeah, water is important, having some sort of water source. And, that's not a bird bath. These are little guys. They'll bird bath that's even a couple inches deep is really starting to get too deep for them. So one thing you can do is, if you have a traditional bird bath and you have, birds that come to it, is you can take part of that and put stones in there where they really come up to the surface, and it's just, there are little bits of water peeking up between them that the hummingbirds can get into. If you have a little bit of a boggy ground, that's useful. I've seen people make little kind of boggy areas around where their air conditioner drips out, and I don't know how well those work for the hummingbird specifically, but it doesn't take a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say making sure it's clean,
Clean,
dumping it every few days, because you don't want mosquitoes to breed in it, of course.
Yeah, and that water will get stale. And if you do what I said with the rocks and everything, once or twice a season, certainly at the beginning of the season, if you pull those rocks out and just give them a good hose and wipe off and get off any, if there's any algae or anything like that growing on there, which can happen even if you're being pretty diligent about dumping out your water and replacing it.
Mm-hmm. I use a big old saucer, a ceramic saucer for that, and place a few stones in there. And I also see, honeybees and others visiting because they're also desperate, especially when we have a few weeks of no rain at all. Then they really need that.
They do. And a ceramic, a terracotta saucer, I like, because water will seep out of there, and it kind of makes sure you're replacing your water on a pretty regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And making sure, obviously, that it gets refilled every couple days if you're walking by it, and maybe put it in a place that is not right in the well-trafficked area, just a little bit off, so they can access it
And not be concerned about you walking by. That's a real vulnerable time for them when they're on the ground, when they're not in the air or up high.
Yeah. And speaking of which, we want to protect our hummingbird friends by providing shelter, protection, nesting spots. But Mark, those nests are so tiny. If they're nesting in my garden, I have never seen one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know that there must be some nesting around my garden because I get them so regularly, but I have yet to come across one of their nests in my own garden. I have seen them in other places, but only where other people have pointed them out. And it seems like the nest on relatively younger trees, things that are 3, 4, 6 inches in diameter is wherever I've seen one. Now I don't know. I'm basing that on personal observation, but also they tend, from what I've seen, again, to not nest terribly high in the trees. They're more at kind of eye level. You'd think we'd see them more, but within that 5 to 8 or 10 feet.
And I think for protection, they like to have a spot where they are shaded, not in the heat of the day, especially when the little chicks are in there. And I was thinking that they really like to make their nests out of like tiny little pieces of grass, I believe. And if we can provide nesting material for them, that's even better.
Yeah. It can be early for you to start mowing your lawn, but leaving some lawn clippings out, we don't need our gardens to everywhere in the garden to be pristine. It's okay to let things get a little bit shaggy. Maybe if you don't want that right in front of your house or where most people are seeing it, but it does help to not cut everything back, that sort of thing that gives them nesting material early in the season.
I do know that they build a new nest every year, so it's not going to return to the old one, or they might pull apart that old nest and take pieces of it, but it's always going to be a brand new nest.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think they're only on it for 2-3 weeks. Those are tiny little eggs and tiny little chicks that are in there. And I love that you mentioned that they do eat small insects, and I think that includes mosquitoes, right?
It does. Mosquitoes, and if they get them, some of the larvae of some other insects, but yeah, they can really knock down that mosquito population.
And shockingly, I was looking up hummingbird pests, like who affects hummingbirds, and it's some of the bigger praying mantises could be a real problem for them. And also other small birds of prey, like a small hawk or something, might take advantage of them or raid their nest. But it's so surprising to hear that an insect could be larger than a small bird and attack it.
Yeah, I guess circle of life, but you always hate to see about a hummingbird on the ground that's been attacked by something or whatever else has happened to it. It always seems a shame.
Yep, and definitely provide, some of those soft, fluffy grasses, some moss. They like fibers. I think like your milkweed pods is what I'm thinking about.
Right.
They always like that spidery, soft silk. So those are great to grow in your garden and also to have available. I put out it's kind of like a hollow ball that I stuff with different materials for the birds, but also squirrels, of course, rate it for their nest materials. I'm like, that's not for you, squirrels, but they will anyway. And I grow ornamental cotton every year, and I find they're also rating that, not just the hummingbirds, but other birds. And I know J.C. Ralston must have some beautiful ornamental cottons as well.
We don't, actually. We should.
No? Yeah. Especially like the red variegated cotton. That's a gorgeous plant. But yeah. And then at the end of the season, you just kind of dry the cotton bolls and let them hang in a wreath or however you want to hang them outside. The animals will find them.
Oh, that's fascinating. I love the idea of having one of those little libraries, but for nesting material for birds and squirrels.
Yeah, we should call it a little free nesting library.
Yeah.
We can make a little cage out of that. Sometimes I'll use the old suet cages, like the singles that, frankly, if I put a suet cake in one of those, it's gone the next day.
Right.
the
Yeah.
raccoons or whoever has opened it up in a second. So I can't use those old single ones at all for the purpose of a suet cake, but I can certainly stuff it full of fibers and things and muley grass heads and stuff that I think that the hummingbirds or others might like.
That's a great idea.
So we talked about how to create a nice habitat in your garden for the hummingbird. Let's talk about specific plants that support hummingbirds, and maybe let's start with the biggest, like shrubs and trees.
Sure. One of my favorite suggestions for people that really, it checks those boxes for the red tubular flowers is our red red buckeyes, Aesculus pavia, the red buckeyes. They're early, so they really, when the hummingbirds first arrive, they're there for them. They provide a lot of nectar for them, and they're beautiful plants as well. So I think that's a great start for the plants, and they'll grow in sun or part shade, which is nice. Later in the season, the Rose of Sharon, the hardy hibiscus, Rose of Sharon, and really all members of the hibiscus family are great. But Rose of Sharon is such an easy one. You can grow it from about as far north in North America as you can get, and where people are still actually living, and grows down here through the deeper south.
I was just going to ask about Rose of Sharon. There's new sterile varieties that won't seed all over your garden. Are those just as good for supporting hummingbirds?
So generally, the way those sterile varieties work is, I won't get into it, but they have 3 sets of chromosomes, and so they can't form seed, but they do try to form seed. They do produce nectar and pollen and all that. They just can't form the seed, so they do have that nectar. Now, that said, some are sterile because they're really heavily double flowered, and you don't want those double flowers. Those the extra petals are usually at the expense of the reproductive parts of the flower. So you do want to stay with those really nice single flowered forms for best effect. And with the Rose of Sharon, you can get whites and pinks and lavenders and some really nice purples. And that's one that the hummingbirds seem to find no matter what the color is. Go ahead.
I was going to say, any other shrubs?
Well, abelias, which are one of the more popular landscape shrubs, those are great. You can get lots of different, foliage colors, variegated ones, green leaf ones, bronze, and those flower pretty well all season. So those are good ones for bridging those gaps when some of your other plants aren't flowering. That's a great one. Another early season one, Weigela, the kind of old fashioned, but they're breeding some great new ones that are really interesting, in those tubular flowers. Fantastic.
Yeah, and I get a lot of reblooming on my Weigelias, especially towards the end of summer and early fall. So that's a great source right there for hummingbirds.
Yeah, and like the Encore azaleas, they're breeding ones that specifically for better rebloom.
And what about azaleas? I don't think I've ever seen a hummingbird visit an azalea flower.
I haven't either, and some of the azaleas and rhododendrons you'd think would have the perfect flower for them. So I don't think I've never seen them on those lists of good garden plants for pollinators, and I've never seen one on there. And goodness knows there's plenty of azaleas around here that we would have seen them on.
Yeah, there's other specific pollinators for azaleas, but yeah, I'm always surprised because you would think, again, it's that perfect shape and long season of bloom for them, but something about maybe in the pollen or something that's just not perfect for them.
Now, speaking of something that you don't necessarily think is perfect and kind of is that kind of a shrub is agave. And some of the agave relatives, like the Texas false agave hesperalo, those tall stalks of flowers on there, when they do flower, are great for hummingbirds. And we probably have more pictures of hummingbirds at our false agave, the hesperalo, than any other plant. It's And that one blooms every year with stalks to 8 or 10 feet tall with kind of soft coral red flowers on there. And they absolutely, it's one of the best hummingbird plants that we have.
That's great to know. Anything like in the tall trees, I'm thinking about honey locusts or that type of maybe bloom, Kentucky coffee tree, maybe might attract hummingbirds.
Yeah, the honey locust, I believe, does, but the hummingbirds seem to, be more in that middle range of plants. I'm not sure about the Kentucky coffee tree. Is that something you've come across for hummingbirds?
I think I've just seen them buzzing around it and wondered if that's what they were attracted to, or maybe they were just hanging around that particular tree.
Yeah, now I do know that a great pollinator plant, including for hummingbirds, but also for bees, and early in the season, is tulip poplar. That is a really great plant. Mentioned the red buckeye, but also the taller, horse chestnuts are great for hummingbirds, and a little bit smaller, but in that tree range are red buds. And we grow a lot of red buds, and we see quite a few very early hummingbirds utilizing those.
Yeah, and I think there's the white red bud and the pink red buds are straight species. And then, of course, all those beautiful introduced cultivars of red buds that they
and
can
all
add.
those flowers, with the exception, like I said, with the Rose of Sharon, there are some double flowered ones like pink pom-poms and flame that you want to, if you're growing for hummingbirds and pollinators, you want to avoid those.
And I think, Mark, that's a good advice for all pollinator garden plants. So I'm thinking especially of those echinacea that like have a full pom-pom look to the flower.
Exactly.
If they're filled in, they're not going to be great for pollinators. You want that open face where you can see the pistils and stamen so that the pollinators can access it, not just the hummingbirds.
Yeah, and speaking of echinacea, something that with the more herbaceous plants, something people don't realize is, that tubular flower, we think of buckeyes and weigela with these long tubes, but the aster group of plants have small tubular flowers that the hummingbirds love, and that includes the echinaceas. Sunflowers, a park near us grows a huge field of sunflowers, so people can take their Instagram pics, and that is one of the best places in Raleigh to see hummingbirds because they are just flitting all over that. And so it's those annuals as well, like sunflowers and zinnias, work just as well as the echinaceas and rudbeckias, those type of asters. And something like a zinnia, those cut and come again zinnias, old fashioned ones, they just keep flowering and flowering and flowering. So you provide long seasons of flowering and bloom.
Yeah, that's one annual I've definitely seen hummingbirds visit, but I'm surprised about the sunflower fields because when I go to local sunflower fields here in the DC area, I'm almost exclusively seeing goldfinches, like a lot of goldfinches around, which is great to see as well.
Well, it's earlier before the sunflower seeds start to ripen. The goldfinches are coming for a lot for the seed, and the hummingbirds are earlier just as they're opening up, and they're helping pollinate them for the birds.
Great to know. We'll have to get out there and visit the fields earlier. It might not be as great for photography of the sunflowers, open faces, but you get great hummingbird photos. That's even better.
If you get there before it's full bloom, but while there's still plenty that are opened up fully, that's when they seem to be the best.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and Bookshop.org.
This episode is brought to you by Welch's Fruit Snacks. Back to school season can be tough on parents, but choosing a snack you and your kids can both get behind doesn't have to be. Stock up on Welch's Fruit Snacks, made with whole fruit and now made with no artificial dyes. It's a snack kids already love and one you can feel good about giving them. Go back to school with Welch's Fruit Snacks, now made with no artificial dyes.
We were mentioning some of our native asters, and I was thinking also of like Anis hyssop and Agastaki, or however you want to pronounce it, Mark.
Yeah, the Agastagis, the Anis hyssops, Monarda, the bee balm is another great one. Those native ones are fantastic for them, and some of the those long summer flowering plants like that are perfect. Sages are great. Another native one that's only native to North America, not necessarily. There are only a couple species native to the East Coast, but penstemon, the beard tongues, are great. The hummingbirds love those in our garden.
Yeah, penstemon, especially some of the new cultivars like dark towers. I see a lot of pollinator activity around them, and I was especially thinking of some of those annual plants that we might have in a hanging basket, because then that puts the hummingbird right at that right height, right, Mark, that you can see it. And I don't know too much about hummingbirds behavior, but I think that 3 to 6 foot range off the ground is kind of what they like.
Yeah, that's their preference, and I don't know if that's because going up higher takes more work, or if it's they put them closer to those hawks, or what that is, or if it's just more of the plants are a little bit lower. But yeah, they want to be in that range, and a lot of our perennials are right there at that 3 foot level. One of our favorites, one of the hummingbirds' favorites, so one of our favorites to grow for the hummingbirds is actually a African violet relative in that same family, the Syningias, which are native down to the Southwest and into Mexico, but seem to grow really well for us. Especially there's a species called Syningia tubiflora, which has long white tubes, and some of the hybrids with that, like Arkansas bells and Bananas Foster is one that the hummingbirds seem to especially like, which those are available. And for kind of hot, dry spots, boy, they just thrive, and the hummingbirds are always over there. That's one of the places where when people come and want to photograph hummingbirds, I send them there and say, well, set up, because you're probably going to see one sometime today.
Interesting, because I have those as houseplants, but I don't think about taking them out for their summer houseplant vacation along with other houseplants that I might put out. So I might start doing that for the hummingbirds.
Well, and that's one that that species is hardy, and the hybrids with it are cold hardy out here in the zone 7 at least. So they're great. But you mentioned hanging baskets. For early in the season, again, fuchsia is a great hummingbird plant. Now, it can be a little bit tricky for us over a whole summer. They'll tend to like it a little bit cooler, but given a little bit of shade, you can stretch them out for a good bit. The sometimes called hummingbird flower or cigar plant, the Kufias, are really nice as well, and they can fill out a basket or a pot really nicely.
Yeah, and I think Kufia is getting a lot of new breeding, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a lot of new introductions of Kufias and more availability. It's not usually something in the mid-Atlantic garden centers you see too much,
No.
but I'm seeing it introduced more and more, and I think people also can overwinter those as a houseplant too.
Exactly. I mentioned early on about shade, and that's something most of the plants we've talked about have really been sun plants. So I do want to put in a plug for some of the shade plants. And the Aesculus, the red buckeyes that I mentioned, those will grow in some shade, but there are a lot of perennials that will as well that are great. Bleeding hearts, for early in the season, are perfect. It's one of those kind of to die for photos of a hummingbird at a bleeding heart flower. The only the most dedicated photographers get that, because you have to lay on the ground as well.
Yep.
But coral bells, heuchera, those are great ones, especially if you get the ones that are bred for more flowers rather than just the foliage.
Mm-hmm.
Columbine, our native columbine, and other ones, non-native ones are great. And one of my favorite plants of all is ginger lilies, which can grow in sun, but I like to grow them in a little bit of part shade, are fantastic. And those are flowering later in the season. So, you want to, I've been talking a lot about early season, but you want to stretch out later in the season as well. Like you mentioned, things are staying around a bit longer than they used to.
Mm-hmm. And those ginger lilies, those are tropical lilies, right? From a corm or a bulb, usually when you're purchasing them at the store.
And when you're getting into zone 7, especially 7B, they're perfect. Many of them are perfectly hardy in the ground. Now, as you get up farther north, they're iffier. You can mulch them well, and a lot of them will especially the kind of classic pass-along white butterfly ginger lily, Hedychium coronarium, will survive through zone 7 with some mulch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking about when you were mentioning fuchsia, my favorite fuchsias are, of course, Gartenmeister, which has that perfect tubular flower for the hummingbirds, and I always have that in a shady spot in a container, along with, usually I'll put like a wine and roses type heuchera that I'm always surprised how much flowering it does get over the season.
The flowering does not get enough billing on those. We're all about the foliage color, but flowering on good ones are really amazing.
Mm-hmm. And then there are the lobelias. So we have our native cardinal flower, and I think it's misnamed, Mark. It should be called hummingbird flower.
It should. That was one on my list, and that's one that can cross from a shady, wet spot to a sunny, not bone dry spot, but average garden spot. It really is an adaptable plant.
Mm-hmm. And it comes in, there's a white form, alba, and a blue form. I actually have it growing in containers because I have mostly dry shade, and it really does want a little bit more moisture, like the cracks of your edges, like where your downspout is, that sort of place.
Yeah, it certainly does. And, the classic, you mentioned white and the blue, but the classic, for people who don't know, is screaming bright red. And it's one of the reddest things in your garden. And the hummingbirds just zero right in on that.
And they're both, all types of lobelia I find are really good reseeders where they're happy. So you're always going to have them coming back, which is good.
Yeah. And they tend to be, it's good because they tend to flower best their second year in. So if you get them reseeding, you really start getting flowering, really heavy flowering every year. But mostly when you buy them, they're already in their second year or kind of their second flush of growth. So they'll flower for you right away.
And we always think of the tall classic red on a tall stem, but I was looking at delphiniums being a great reblooming plant and reseeding plant in your garden for hummingbirds as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you can grow good delphiniums. That's a great one. Lupins as well. That same kind of upright flowers that we struggle. I struggle to grow here in the South very effectively, but they are great for those of your listeners that are not quite as heat stressed as we can be down here in Raleigh.
I have a lot of trouble with lupins too, and same thing with foxglove. I'm always trying to eke along a few foxglove, but that's if you're in a little bit cooler climate, those are perfect choices.
Yep, exactly.
And the vines we need to talk about, especially trumpet creeper vine. Campsis radicans. It's a monster in my garden. I'm constantly battling it, Mark. But then I leave some of the blooms because I know how the hummingbirds love it so much.
Yeah, the trumpet creeper and crossvine bignonia, both vigorous vines. Great for, covering up an old, unused double wide trailer, or because they can get big. But I have them growing in my woodland native, and I can only tell that they're there because I find the flowers on the ground, and I can see the stems going up the trees, but they're way up there. Now, we talked about hummingbirds prefer down low, but you do sometimes see them. I can imagine them going up there and getting that a little bit higher. There's also the annual cardinal vine, which has a real fine ferny texture and then bright red tubular flowers. That's another great one, and that's an annual. It can seed a little bit, but mostly, you replant that every year.
And I also find morning glory vines, which another monster, or can be really misbehaved, especially if you let it reseed everywhere in your garden. But that's a great one, opening up early in the morning for your hummingbirds.
And that's a relative of the cardinal vine or cardinal climber as well. And so it's got, people know those beautiful open flowers with the deep throat work so well.
And then, of course, we can't forget our native honeysuckle, Liniceros sempervirens. That is, I would say, your classic photo. If I see a photo of somebody taking of a hummingbird, it's usually visiting that flowering vine.
That is for sure. And one that there's a couple that I see them at a lot, but the top one that I've seen is Major Wheeler. They seem to love that, and that's a real heavy bloomer. That may be part of it, but that's the one. If people ask for one that I recommend, it's Major Wheeler.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about hanging baskets again, and a hanging basket is full of petunias, always great. But I think lantana, if you were going to give the hummingbirds a survey form, right, and say, what would you like gardeners to plant even more of? I would think they would say, give us more lantana.
Well, you're right. The lantana is great, and the petunias as well. I tend to not grow so many annuals, but the perennial lantanas for sure that I do grow. And again, I keep mentioning this, but those long bloom times that really helps out between some of the other things that pop up and flower and then stop flowering.
And another annual, like for shade, Terrenia. It's got that classic tubular shape and color, but usually you're going to have it in a shady container or something. And,
Yeah, I struggle with Terrenia. But yeah, that's a great plant. I'm glad you're bringing up the annuals, because those do just flower all season.
And that brings up amount of flowers in our garden, right, Mark? So should we be planting a mass of, say, the hummingbird mint in one spot to attract, or should we do a clump over here, another clump over there 20 feet away, another clump another 20 feet away? What do you think we should do to attract hummingbirds in our landscape?
Well, I think small masses help, but what I really recommend is diversity. The diversity of plants gets you those blooms all through from early to late. Enough critical mass that they can actually see and come to your plant is helpful. So some of those real workhorses like the anise hyssop, the lantana, if you have some of those, massed or really in some, slightly larger clumps. And then the other things kind of scattered through here and there. I think that's the best. But always my recommendation for any garden, just about anything you talk to me about, pest resistance, pollinators, whatever, I say plant a real diversity of plants.
Mm-hmm. And that way you also have something in bloom at all times.
At all times,
or
exactly.
Kind of overlapping the seasons, but enough that it's not just onesie twosies, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about natives versus non-natives, because I know that Buddleia butterfly bush, that's another popular hummingbird plant, but there are new sterile varieties that you can grow if you're worried about them reseeding or becoming, misbehaving invasive plants.
Yeah, and that hadn't really been an area in at least the southeastern U.S. But yeah, the native plant versus non-native. You remember these hummingbirds migrate long distances. They're not just using the plants that we have native here. They're using all kinds of plants, and it's really about the size and shape and the production of nectar is really what is going to attract the hummingbirds and is going to feed them. So it's they're not picky like we sometimes think they are. They're willing to go to a wide variety of plants, and many of the plants we've talked about are not native at all. And some of the ones that are best, like the lantana, is not a native plant.
Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at where they're wintering over, what's native there, like the lantana and others, to have them in your garden for the summer, that's going to be familiar to them or a relative of that plant.
Exactly.
And what do you think about supplemental feeding, like putting out those hummingbird syrup feeders?
Well, if you do that, again, you're just giving them a quick shot of adrenaline, which can be helpful. It's a great way to see the hummingbirds up close. You can do that right outside your window or on your deck, and you can see them. You must be diligent about cleaning them out. They need to be cleaned out regularly. Some people told me that you need to do it more than once a week is the recommendation. I don't use them personally, and I have plenty of hummingbirds just with the plants in my garden. And I don't plant specifically for hummingbirds. I just plant a real diversity of plants, and enough of them attract the hummingbirds that they're there. So I'm not against those hummingbird feeders as long as you're really caring for them and cleaning them out well at least once a week.
Mm-hmm. I know somebody who's really good at getting hummingbirds to all their feeders, but they are spending a lot of money, Mark, a lot of bags and bags of sugar and making their own simple syrups. It's a lot to keep up with, but once you start feeding them and having them visit, you can't just cut it off.
No. And especially, if you're, people are gung-ho in the spring and they do it in the spring, and you start getting in the summer, it starts getting hotter and you start getting busier and you're going to the pool and going on vacation and doing other things. And then it just stops. Your hummingbirds have gotten used to that. So if you are going to stop, you really ought to taper it off a little bit more than just cold turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you said, we need to keep sanitation, keep it refilled. And for me, it would just be an ant parade. So I don't even bother to start on that.
Yeah, no, I know myself. I'm a bit of a lazy gardener, and that's not going to be where I'm going to spend my time. Is on a hummingbird feeder.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think our solution, Mark, is plant more plants.
Exactly.
Those that have flowers and more diversity, and bringing those great pollinators to our garden. So how can our listeners contact you to find out more?
Well, they can come to jcra.ncsu.edu, and that's going to be the easiest way to find us and find me. My email is listed there. You can catch us every week on Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern on our midweek program. It's myself and my fantastic team of horticulturists. You can also watch those on YouTube. We post all those plus a lot of other things on our YouTube channel.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Any final thoughts on attracting hummingbirds to your garden?
Well, what I'd just say is attracting hummingbirds is pretty easy because they like the things that we like. We like the flowers. We like the pretty colors. They do too. So, if you have a good hummingbird garden, you're going to have a good garden.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Kathy.
Ostrich ferns, plant profile. Ostrich ferns, Onoclea struthiopteris, formerly Metachui struthiopteris, are perennial plants that thrive in the moist, shady spots of the garden. The fern fronds resemble ostrich feathers in their shape, but are chartreuse green in color. They are also known as fiddlehead fern and shuttlecock fern. They are native to eastern North America, Europe, and Asia. They are hardy to zones 2 to 8. The mature size is 3 to 5 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. They spread by rhizomes, and when they are happy, can quickly colonize an area. Ostrich ferns make great ground covers for damp, shady portions of the garden and are great for erosion control on a slope. They are also grown in containers. During the winter, the large sterile fronds die back to the ground and new fiddleheads will unfurl in the spring. The plant's spore-bearing stalks, called fertile fronds, are also attractive and remain standing through the winter. Ferns do not have flowers, so they do not attract pollinators. They are deer-proof and have few pests. These ferns are low care. They thrive in consistently moist, well-draining acidic soils with lightly dappled to full shade. To propagate them, divide the crowns in the spring. Ostrich ferns, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, I'm enjoying the flowers on my sun parasol mandavillas, zonal geraniums, and dianthus. Over at the community garden plot, we're harvesting fairy tale eggplants and thriller squash. In the garden tips that we shared this week on social media, we talked all about August gardening tasks, including that August is the month in our region to dig and divide and or move your daylilies, peonies, and irises. The August 2026 issue of Washington Gardener magazine is now out and posted online. You can see that at washingtongardener.blogspot.com. Inside this issue, our cover story is Lovely and Luscious Lisianthus. You can also meet the Flower Potluck founders. We have articles on how glyphosate affects bees, growing salsify, the oyster plant, murmurations about starlings, garden book reviews, millipedes, ancient origins, raising your garden to new heights, and much more. In local gardening events, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you might want to attend the Wednesday, August 19th, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. talk on the benefits and applications of biosolids for gardens. This is by Bloom, a local affordable compost alternative, rich in organic and nutrients. It's being held at the Arlington Central Library on North Quincy Street in Arlington, Virginia, sponsored by the Friends of Urban Agricultural and the Extension Master Gardeners. The event is free. No registration is required. You can see details at arlingtonurbanag.org. And then please join me Sunday, September 1st at 7 p.m. at Meadowlark Botanical Gardens in Vienna, Virginia. I will be giving a talk on my book, Ground Cover Revolution, and doing a book sale and signing. More details on that will be available soon at novaparks.com. And then on Tuesday, September 8th at 2:30 p.m., is the Gardener's Focus Tour Native Garden at Hillwood Garden and Estate in Washington, D.C. You can explore the Collections and Research Center Native Garden, including the Bioretention Pond, with the Garden Section Manager and Coordinator Cecily Armsworth. Tickets are distributed at the Visitor Center at opening each day. It's a 30-minute tour and is limited to 15 people. The cost is included in your entry donation. To find out more details about that, go to hillwoodmuseum.org.
This is Christy Page with the last word from Food Gardening Magazine with How to Keep Lettuce Tip Burn Away from Your Garden by Amanda MacArthur. Growing lettuce at home can be a rewarding experience and give you access to delicious greens from spring through the summer and even into the fall. However, brown edges around the leaves, known as lettuce tip burn, can be an issue if not prevented. Tip burn is a common problem in lettuces as well as cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower. The condition is characterized by browning on the leaf margins and tips, which can eventually turn brown and become dry and brittle. At the most basic level, lettuce tip burn occurs when there is an imbalance of calcium in the plant tissue. This imbalance can be caused by several factors, including too much fertilizer or too much water that dilutes the soil nutrients and reduces the availability of calcium. It can also happen if there's extreme temperature fluctuation or if plants are exposed to high levels of light intensity during hot periods. In addition, it can occur as a result of poor root structure or when plants are transplanted from pots into garden beds. While leaves with tip burn aren't harmful to eat, one of the big problems comes from secondary issues such as rot. Fortunately, there are ways to prevent brown edges from showing up on your lettuce crops. Now, how to prevent? First and foremost, make sure to use well-drained soil for planting lettuce so that excess moisture does not build up in the soil and reduce calcium availability. If you're growing lettuce via hydroponics, that may simply be a symptom of too high a dilution of nutrients to water. Secondly, fertilize your vegetable patch regularly with balanced fertilizers to ensure adequate nutrition for your plants without overloading them with nitrogen or other elements that could lead to lettuce tip burn. Finally, pay attention to root growth before transplanting seedlings into garden beds. Healthy roots will help increase the uptake of important nutrients like calcium from the soil environment and reduce the likelihood of brown edges appearing on mature lettuce leaves. Taking steps towards preventing brown edges from forming on lettuce begins as soon as you start sowing seeds outdoors or transplanting potted seedlings into their final growing beds in the garden environment. Make sure to water regularly, but do not overdo it. This will ensure adequate hydration for roots while avoiding soil saturation that prevents nutrient uptake from occurring effectively in plant cells. Second, fertilize with balanced nutrients according to local recommendations for optimal plant growth. Third, avoid applying too much nitrogen as this can cause an influx of less desirable elements such as chlorine into foliage, resulting in brown edge formations on lettuce later down the line. Fourth, provide protection against excessive sunlight exposure during hot summer days using shade cloths or planters. This will create an ideal growing environment for lettuces without allowing the sun to damage leaf cells, which leads to brown edges. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at foodgardening.com.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the genius ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Class is now in session, and the UPS Store is here to help you ace arriving on campus. Our certified packing experts can pack everything you need, from desktops to decor. Plus, when you pack and ship with us, you get our exclusive pack and ship guarantee. Your items arrive safe or your money back. Restrictions and limitations apply. To get a 20% off packing coupon and for full details, visit theupsstore.com/packing.
Thank you for listening to Garden DC. This episode was made by Real Humans. It was produced and hosted by myself, Kathy Jentz. The Let the Sunshine music interludes are by James Mulvaney. If you liked this episode, you may also enjoy listening to Garden DC Podcast Episode 140, Daphne, Shrubs, and Their Relatives. Episode 229, Mahonia, Reexamined. Episode 47, Pollinator, Victory Gardens. You can become a listener supporter by going to the link in our show notes. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Pinterest at WDC Gardener, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app. Please take a moment to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC and with your gardening friends so other gardeners can find us too. Happy gardening!